Karen Kaplan. I live in Attleboro. I'm an instructor at Bay State College, full-time in history of fashion. I teach that. I teach textiles. I teach styling. I also teach at RISD in the continuing education program. I love teaching in general, but I'm very passionate about historic fashion, especially when we look at the social history on top of it. So this was a perfect opportunity with the 100-year anniversary of the Titanic. So I thought it would be good to show people how others dressed during that time period and how some of those on the Titanic in the first class would have dressed. And I just thought there would be interest, but I didn't know there would be this much interest. So it was very nice to see all those people in the audience. I love history of fashion in all phases, but this period, particularly because so much was happening in the world. There were so many changes, and because of not only the change in what was going on in the world, but the change in the silhouette of the clothes. A lot of the restrictions were starting to change at that time. They were getting away from the really heavy corseting and going into a lot leaner line, which was going to lead into the 20s. That really free-flowing fashion that happened for women during that period, and the right to vote. And so I just think it's a very interesting transition time. We see elements of history, sometimes many elements in one garment. They might take influence from everywhere. Even here, as I talked about in the 1912 era, that is taken from 100 years earlier. And that empire line is taken from ancient times, ancient Greece and Rome. Things keep coming back, and sometimes they change and they shift, but you definitely see influence from other periods. Even now, we have many going on at the same time. We have some 20s, we have some 70s, we have some 50s. We even have this period because of Downton Abbey. I like to collect, but I also do a little bit of selling on eBay and Etsy. And if you're interested in selling me any old clothes from an attic, from your grandmother, I'm happy to purchase. I'm very interested in all eras. Also, I work at a store right down the street called Main Street Inspirations. They have a great new consignment shop, and I sell vintage jewelry in there. I'd love to see people care about how they dress again. Maybe not to this extent, certainly not with as much corseting, but to have the pride in how they look and care about dressing formally when the occasion calls for it. And just those little details when it comes to appearance, I think is important. And the manners. The manners, we're losing them fast. And I just think that a way of behaving, we've lost a lot of that, especially with the youth. And I just think that bringing some of that back is crucial. A lot of us are, myself included, are really into nostalgia right now. With everything going on in the world, not being able to trust what's going to happen tomorrow. We're in 2012, there's this whole, oh, the world's going to end. And I think people are just looking for a quieter time. I think they're looking for what looks like it might be a happier time, a little bit slower time period. Everything's moving so fast. That way of dressing, that way of behaving, that brings us back to that. And also, people are drawn to tragedy, unfortunately. You know, it's human nature. You know, you just look at it and you just say, well, thank goodness that's not me. You know, it's someone else. And it's a fascination. It's like going by the scene of an accident and people feel like they have to look at it, even though they might be very upset by it. They're drawn. And I think so it's part the tragedy and part just the different way of life that people are nostalgic about. In steerage, there wouldn't have been the cleanliness that you saw upstairs in the upper decks. There wouldn't have been the luxuries that the other people, these richer people had. They would have been roughing it more. They would have been crowded more into cabins. They wouldn't have had as much space. Would have been a lot smaller. Probably the temperature would have been a lot less pleasant. Maybe the smells wouldn't have been quite as nice. So I think that's something people don't really look into as much. And we don't have surviving clothing from the lower classes because they used it up. You know, they either worked it to death or they wore it until it fell apart or they made it into something else. So we don't have examples like we do from the upper classes. What was really going on and how people lived who were not in that upper class. I'm hoping to do more of these in different eras. I know people are interested in a lot of different time periods, 1940s, the hippies of the 60s. I mean, it's just that people, I see an interest out there for looking back.